Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
All right, you're welcome along. It's a special Thursday night rugby here on Off the Ball. Last night we brought you that feature interview with Rory Best that you can listen back on offtheball.com. But we do want to talk about the Six Nations, which is almost upon us, just over a week away. And there is a lot going on. The launch was yesterday. We'll hear some of that as the evening goes on. I'm joined by Keith Wood. Evening, Keith.
Hi, Nathan. How are you doing?
Very well. And also by Tom English, Chief Sports Writer with BBC Scotland. Evening, Tom.
Hi, Nathan. Hi, Keith.
Hi, Tom. How are you getting on?
Grand.
We're all grand. Tom, is everyone in Scotland grand, though? Because that's where the drama has been today. Finn Russell, no longer part of the Scotland squad. He's been sent home from their camp. He's going to miss the game against Ireland on Saturday week. A statement on Twitter, Scotland team spokesperson said, "Standoff Finn Russell will play no further part in preparations for Scotland's Six Nations opener against Ireland, having been disciplined for a breach of team protocol during the week's camp in Edinburgh. He has returned to his club." Have we any idea what's gone on?
Trying to piece together the pieces as the day has gone on, Nathan. I mean, you say he was sent home. There's some dubiety over that, whether he was sent home or if he walked out.
Right.
Listen, I mean, there's been difficulties between Finn Russell and Gregor Townsend going back a little while. I think they kind of came to a head at half-time in the last game of the Six Nations at Twickenham. Scotland were annihilated in the first half. I think there were 31 points to 7 down at the break. There was a big contretemps in the dressing room between the two of them. I think they went into a side room in the Twickenham dressing rooms and they had it out. And at the time it was kind of, because of the recovery, Scotland made a great recovery and ended up drawing the match. And at the time it was kind of downplayed as a kind of things that happen in the midst of a crisis. Two honest guys getting involved in a heated debate for the good of the team. I think it was a lot more serious than that, and I think it was the kind of first, as we understood it, anyway, the first manifestation of difficulties in the relationship between the two of them. And today we've this catastrophic news for Scotland is that he's gone. He's not going to be playing against Ireland. Will he be playing for the rest of the Six Nations? We don't know. Does he want to play in the rest of the Six Nations under Gregor Townsend? We don't know. Does Gregor Townsend want him back? We don't know that either. So there's an awful lot still to be clarified in all of this.
That breakdown in relationship then, as it's emerged over the past 18 months or so, like Finn Russell for a lot of people would have been seen as very much Gregor Townsend's guy, like very much backed him, the style of play that Scotland wanted to go with, all was around Phil Russell. Was it just personal differences? Was it that he felt Russell wasn't delivering at certain times?
No, I don't. I'm not sure how personal it is. I mean, there is a conception, or an understandable conception, or misconception about Gregor Townsend that he is as flamboyant in his coaching as he was as a player. And you can see that in the way his Glasgow team played and the way his Scotland team played. But actually, he's quite a controlling character. He doesn't necessarily give the players their head in the run of the game. It's quite a structured coaching method that he has. I suspect, knowing Finn Russell, that has caused issues. I know at Twickenham, Gregor Townsend wanted him to play more of a kicking game than a running game, and Finn Russell, part of the reason why they clashed at half time was, look, the kicking game isn't working. We need to do something different. And Gregor Townsend allegedly says, well, you just need to kick better then. So there's a lot of that going on. If it's personal, I don't know. I don't have any evidence to say that they don't like each other. I don't know that. But certainly in terms of rugby philosophy, there is a clash there. There may be personal issues as well. We just don't know. And obviously the SRU have said a breach of protocol. Still trying to figure out exactly what that is. There's a lot of rumours flying, but let's not engage in rumours just now.
Keith, it's obviously a huge blow to Scotland. Sent home, walked out. Obviously, we've no history here in Irish sport of such a situation happening with a star player, but we know these things can be divisive both outside of camp and inside of camp, and for it to happen 10 days away, in terms of even their game plan and Finn Russell being at the centre of it, like how difficult is this going to be for Gregor Townsend to suddenly get this back in the space of 10 days for a trip to Dublin?
Well, that's his job. That's what he has to do. I'm interested to hear that Tom would say that Gregor was controlling. Now, I know him as a player, and I know him having toured with him, and he was a maverick type player, actually very similar to Finn Russell, I think, in many respects. But I also was under the impression that Gregor wanted to play an incredibly unstructured game wherever it was possible. And maybe, when the pressure of international rugby comes on for a period of time, the unstructured stuff doesn't work quite as well, or they need to build on it. And maybe that was the point of friction. I don't know. I would imagine to be quite hard to if you were structured, to have an out half like Finn Russell, because he'd frighten the life out of you. And there's times, I've watched him play a lot now in the last couple of years, and he tries things that most people don't try, and some of them come off and some of them don't come off. He is in a club where he can try that all the time, because it suits Racing down to the ground perfectly. Whether it suits Scotland, because Scotland are often under a huge amount of pressure. They don't have a huge pack of forwards compared to the Racing ones. I'm not entirely as certain. So Gregor's job is to go and galvanise the team. And look, we say this and time again, when a coach goes or when a good player gets injured, or what do you do then? You get on with it. So the players have to get on with it. They have to put aside all the rubbish or anything and all the innuendo or all the guessing or whatever the hell it is that's gone on or has gone on. They get past all that and then say, how do we use this as an opportunity to galvanise our performance against Ireland? Because honest to God, the second he's gone out the door and he's not playing, you're then thinking about whoever's taking on the 10 jersey, and you're then thinking about actually going to play and win the game. So they can't worry about it. They can't care about it and say, okay, that's it, done. The dealing with him coming back into the squad is the week after next job. It isn't this week's job. So I think they get past that very quickly. It does sheer Scotland of an unbelievable talent, and at different times he is able to do things that few others can. And with him and Hagen a team, you have an opportunity to unlock anything. Without him, it becomes harder. It may give them a little bit more stability in their structure. I don't know.
Tom, in terms of a replacement, Adam Hastings is in the squad, son of former Scottish international, very much legend of the game, Gavin Hastings. Is he a chip off the old block? Is he of that quality?
Well, no, he's a lot to find, but he's young. He's maturing as a player. He's by no means the finished article. He still is quite inconsistent, but when he's good, he's very good. He's now going to be in the front line for the Ireland game. The problem. I mean, when you have Finn Russell playing at 10, you have Adam Hastings coming off the bench. That's okay. If you've now got Adam Hastings at 10, who's your backup 10? Unless they go back to Duncan Weir at Worcester, and he hasn't been capped since a good few years now, and has been ignored by successive Scottish coaches, or they might pick Rory Hutchinson. They might play Rory Hutchinson as a backup 10, the Northampton centre. So but you're digging deep into the well now, and that's a problem for him. And I think what Keith says is right about that. These guys will crack on. These Scotland players will crack on. But I think key to this is whether they see Finn Russell as being wronged or not. If they think he's been wronged by Gregor Townsend, there could be a big problem. If they think that Finn Russell has done something to warrant exclusion from the squad, then I think they all sail on and they all rally round and they do their best in Ireland. But I think that's a key point. How do they feel about what's gone on here?
Would Russell have been seen as a real leader in that group?
He would have been, yeah. I mean, a big personality. A kind of unique kind of character, a bit of a maverick, a bit of a wisecracker. Very obviously, we know what kind of footballer he is. He's very flamboyant. He's very, very creative. He's just a bit different, He's different, and big personality. And I think he will be missed. I mean, there's some players that I'd have relationships with in the Scotland squad. You might talk to them off the record and various things. Today, none of them were saying anything. Right. They just did not want to get involved at all, even off the record. So I think something serious has clearly gone down.
Keith, just before we get on to where Ireland are 10 days out from the start of the Six Nations, Events moved quite quickly at the end of last week with regards to Saracens, and the disciplinary report into the salary cap breach was leaked over the last 24, 48 hours, found that their relegation was because they broke rules, with Nigel Ray entering into ventures totalling €1.5 million with England players Mario Itoje, Billy and Mako Vinipola and Chris Ashton. An overspend last year of the salary cap of almost £1 million. It was well over £1 million 3 years ago. Managed to get it down to under 100,000 in between. But the end result is they are relegated. Is that fair? Is that right? Is that a proportionate punishment for Saracens?
It isn't proportionate to the response from the legal group that they had from the judge. I can't remember his judge now. I did actually read through elements of that report. It is pretty in depth, and you need to stew on it for a little bit longer. Their recommendation was 36 points and a $5.5 million fine, not relegation. I don't know that anybody has covered themselves with any glory with this over the last period of time. Things have been drip fed out. It was cloak and dagger stuff. You could only, there was a representative from each club was allowed to look at the report. They were only allowed to look at it. They couldn't take any photocopies of it. They couldn't take any notes while they were in the room, and then had to kind of immediately forget it when they left. And I still think that not every element of it has come out. So what it has done is it's put a very bright light on the sport. It's put a huge number of people under pressure with it. It has the law of unintended consequences come in all over the place. So what's going to happen for all the Saracens games that are played for the rest of the year? I mean, they're only marking time. So
resting players for Europe.
Well, but you're only marking time. So, what way does that go? It's very hard to play a game with nothing at stake. I can tell you that for me, when I played, I didn't want to play any dead rubbers, because the game, it's a hard, bloody game. You put an awful lot into it. It really needs to mean something. And so I think that makes it very tough. It also makes it very tough because it's been incredibly spiteful, the manner which it, right or wrong, no, and I'm not casting any side on it, but some of the reaction has been beyond vindictive, and people will say for just cause that it has. But equally well, will that mean that Saracens will play harder against that team? Again, Exeter in particular have been very vocal about it. Or will they take their foot off the pedal for somebody else? I mean, it just throws up a huge amount of quandaries. And then it throws up the quandaries. I don't think it matters with the Six Nations. It doesn't matter at all, because that's in a block of period of time. Saracens players have played more than enough rugby. They're absolutely fine. They're allowed to be picked and played. What happens in summer tours? What happens for the Lions the following year? What happens if they're all playing in the Championship? What happens if they go and play in France or anywhere else? Will they then get picked for England? Mark McCall came on. I mean, I love the reaction. Sorry, I'm talking a long bit on this one, but I love the reaction from it. So Mark McCall comes out and said, listen, some of these guys have been playing for 10 years, could be considered a rest. And then he said how disrespectful it is that he says that they're able to get a rest out of it. So every comment that's made from each side, and there actually are many sides, has a counter comment and a counter comment to that comment. And it's actually descended into, I think, farce almost at this stage.
The Irish provinces have been very quiet about it. Whenever coaches or anybody's asked about it, they haven't had a huge amount to say. But like, Saracens have also been the dominant team in Europe. They came out of Munster's pool this year. They beat Leinster in a Champions Cup final last year. There must be a lot of frustrated people in Irish rugby as well. They've held their counsel. Are they doing the right thing by keeping quiet?
I think it's very difficult to criticise it, because the European competition does not adhere to a salary cap. And so, yes, they qualified because of going through the Premiership. Would they have qualified with or without that? Look, I don't know. And we are down to that point of pure speculation. I think the whole thing, as I said, it makes rugby look pretty poor. Saracens haven't come out of it well at all. I just think there's been a distinct lack of transparency over every bit of the conversation. So we're looking at stories and saying, do we have all the facts for them? Because everybody's jumping up and down with the snippet, which, well, for me, I hate, because I'd like to see the whole story. I'd like to see it all set out in front as to everything that would happen. But when you get a judiciary to give a view on it, and they give a view and then it's ignored, or it's gone much further. And I don't think Saracens have helped themselves at all, because they said actually we're absolutely under the salary cap this year, and they're not. Or presumably they're not. But then they were saying, would they open the books? And I don't know whether they were said that they were supposed to be opening the books or not. So it was. And then whether other clubs would do it. The whole thing has just become a morass. But it's made it for a very strange season. And the only thing that I can remember that was anyway similar was in '99, when the English teams didn't go and play in the Heineken Cup that year. It was as if it almost demeaned it for something else. And they'd say afterwards that, but Ulster won it because none of the English teams were in it. Ulster won it because they were the best team in Europe that year. End of story. But there's always that little sense of, well, there's something missing. How does that go?
Yeah, that it could end up, whereas we're asking George Cruz last week whether there's an asterisk around Saracens. Next year, whoever wins the Champions Cup, they may be putting it out there's an asterisk around them because Saracens weren't there.
Yeah.
Let's turn to Ireland then, because the Six Nations was launched yesterday. The new captain, Jonathan Sexton, was there alongside Andy Farrell. A lot of the questions to Jonathan Sexton, Keith, were around the captaincy and how vocal he can be and how angry he can be on the pitch, and very different type of captain to Rory Best. Are we reading too much into Johnny Sexton's dealings with referees, or actually is there legitimate concern there about how that relationship is?
Well, I don't know that it's concern, but I think we're not reading too much into anything, because actually how he deals with a referee becomes very important. He is the one who has to be the most vocal. Tone matters a huge amount talking to a referee. Picking your moment counts a huge amount. Your body language counts a huge amount when you're talking to a referee. If you're rushing up to a referee to give him a bollocking, referees tend not to take too nicely to that, So, look, he has shown at different times that he can push it too much. Look, he is he 33, 34 years of age? This is where he has to grasp that idea of maturity, and he could do a really, really good job, because he fulfills a lot of the roles for what a captain does. He is a big decision maker for Ireland and has been for Leinster, has done well with Leinster with it, and he wants it. Now, I often don't know that I want guys to want it. I want them to get it, and then want it after the fact. Well, he has it now, and let's see how he goes about it. But he can't react just as a player, and he has to play as a player, but he can't react just as a player. He also has to react as a captain.
It seems from everything that's been coming out over the last couple of days that Stuart Lancaster has been doing quite a bit of work with him on his leadership, and obviously Andy Farrell involved in that as well. That tone that you talk about there, that's so necessary and so important in the dealings with referees. When you think back to your captaincy, would you have spoken to more experienced players when you were starting out about how they did it, or is it something that you just learn by doing?
You learn from all the guys who were captain before you. And I did talk to a lot of different guys. We didn't have a very mature team with a lot of caps when I became captain at 24. But you do watch every other captain that's been there, and you try and do more of the same, and you take the things that work for you that they would have done. But you also, you need to be yourself. And like, if Johnny has to be himself, if that's just taking 2 percentage points off that mad anger that he often shows, and that's the right amount for it, well, then that'd be perfect. It's a big privilege to be captain of your country, and it's a huge honour. And I know he mentioned that last week as well. But there's a huge responsibility that sits with it too. So, look, he is the guy that has all the capability to do it. He hasn't done a huge amount of it, and now he's getting the chance to do it at international rugby. So, I think an awful lot of what he said, for me, comes across as the right thing. It's how do the players respond to him? It's who does he rely on in the team? It also, it's great for him. There's a new coach and a captain. Is he there for 2 years? And I know he says he wants to play forever, but Peter Pan, he's not. And will we get 2 great years out of him, and will it be the crowning part of his career? That's what we're wishing for.
Tom, the way we're talking about Johnny Sexton there and his captaincy, and listen, he's such an experienced player who's achieved pretty much everything he can. in the game and will go down as one of Ireland's greatest. Those concerns, would they be recognised in Scotland as well as maybe a weakness that Sexton has in his armour?
No, no, not in the slightest. Listen, Johnny Sexton has got a phenomenal record against Scotland, and I don't think they'd see too many weaknesses in his game at all. And I don't think that there has literally been no discussion in Scotland about Johnny Sexton being Ireland captain. None, because they would see it as, well, it's logical. He's a great player. Does he have to temper his approach as captain? Yes, probably he does. Can he? Of course he can. He's a great presence, worldwide figure. I think most people outside of Ireland would see this as a kind of a no-brainer. You know, he's got great personality on the pitch. He's a great presence. Why wouldn't they make him a captain? I mean, literally in Scotland since the decision was announced, there has been no debate about it at all, because they see it as utterly sensible.
Our rugby coverage with thanks to Vodafone, team of us, everyone in. Keith, one of the big selections for Andy Farrell is going to be at hooker. I know you were on OTBAM last week going through your depth chart when at that stage Ronan Kelleher was still out with a broken hand, so you'd Niall Scannell, Rob Herring and Sean Cronin. Kelleher is now fit. He was on OTBAM earlier in the week. I might just play a clip of this. And over the course of his development as a rugby player, he's played in a number of different positions around the pitch, and he says he's been adding to his skill set.
You've obviously played a host of different positions. Does that help as well, your awareness of the different roles within the scrum and further back the pitch as well?
Maybe slightly, yeah. But I think it's probably the training that we're doing at the moment. Like, everyone's able to kind of fit in everywhere around the pitch. Like, so just be a lot of unstructured stuff, and then we also get given a bit of license to play as well, and just see what's in front of us and act off that. So that's probably the main thing, I'd say. Yeah,
because we hear about that unstructured stuff quite a bit. It's one of Lancaster's main thoughts, is that unstructured play should be something that you do in training. So when you're doing that, are you showing up in like wide positions? Are you showing up outside the pack very often?
Well, yeah, kind of just wherever you end up on a turnover, really. Like, and you just kind of look up, and if there's space in front of you, you try and cover the ball to attack that space. And if not, there's space elsewhere, so you're just moving into that position to really try and get your hands on the ball and just try and do something with it. Like,
is that something that you had a good understanding of before you started working with Stuart?
And
with Leo as well.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but it was more. I think it was more the way we've been training the last 3 years. So like, it hasn't just been this year; it's been a culmination of the last couple of years, just in training with the lads, like, and just doing those high tempo Tuesday sessions, like, that have really managed to make it become second nature when you're out in the field then, really.
Yeah, that's Ronan Kelleher there talking to Owen Sheehan on OTBAM earlier in the week. So with Ronan Kelleher fit, Keith, that depth chart of Scannell, Herring, Cronin, does that change?
It does, of course. I know Heffernan is inside there in the squad and Cronin isn't, so that helps that. Scannell isn't in it either. So I think it probably comes down to Herring and Kelleher. Only for me, you want somebody that's a bit of experience in there, but you also need. Like, I just think this guy offers something a bit different. I love listening to that chat. I haven't heard him talk before. Hooker's an unusual position in that it's incredibly physical. Scrums are incredibly hard. The pressure at the line-out is incredibly difficult. It's like threading a needle from about 10 yards in a gale. It can be quite frightening. But it gives you a very unusual perspective because you're the last up out of a lot of different things. You get to see an awful lot of the field. So when you're coming out of the scrum, you're running. Everybody else has already got there. You can fit in. And if you're a footballer and you have an ability to run onto the ball, which he has, and if he's played in other positions, he's actually able to see where he slots in best. If the game is unstructured, that's ideal for somebody like him. Like, really is, because if the game is fully structured and he has to run and sprint and do these 3 or 4 things and hit that ruck and then hit the next ruck, that's why I think there's great liberation at playing hooker, because if you have the skills, you have the speed, you have a bit of footballing ability, you can get into the right places because you can see where you need to go. So look, I'm excited by him. I didn't think he was part of it when we were having the discussion last week because of the injury. I want to see him at some stage during this Six Nations. I want to see if he's fit enough, whether he starts or doesn't start. I think you want to ease guys in where you can, but that could be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But he offers something very different, and I think he's very exciting. And you need to have ball carriers wherever you can get them. And if there's one criticism I'd have over Ireland in the last couple of years, and one of those years was a great year, one of those years wasn't a good year. My one criticism is that we had too often we had front rows and second rows catching the ball and running into contact. So, from a standing start. So he offers something very different from that.
So do we still need a little bit of patience when it comes to an awful lot of these young players, including Ronan Kelleher, that let's see some game time, but doesn't necessarily need to start that first game against Scotland?
Well, we're not in a rush. We want to what's best for him. It's not what's best for us because we want to get excited watching it. It's what's best. So look, I don't know enough about him to be able to make that call and say that you absolutely have to pick him. But what I can say is I look at it and know that he offers something very, very different from other players. And we just haven't seen. He's a big guy too, and he's well able to shift. So let's see, if we can use him and use him well, it may open up another opportunity to pick a different type of player in another part of the pack.
Tom, just to wrap up then, obviously this Finn Russell saga, I'm sure, is going to dominate Scottish rugby between now and the game. If we were to go back to yesterday, before all this had kicked off, what were the attitude and the feeling around Scotland ahead of the Ireland game? Obviously the World Cup was a bit of a disaster. Was there a feeling of total change, that it was going to be a very different Scottish squad coming over?
I wouldn't say very different, Nathan. Certainly some of the coaches have changed. The defence coach Matt Taylor is no longer there. Steve Tandy is in place. Peter de Villiers, the former French prop, he is now in as scrum coach. He's a new addition to the coaching ticket as well. Will the team change dramatically? There'll be bits and pieces. Obviously, the big change will be at 10 now for the Ireland game. I think there won't be massive change, and there won't be any great expectation. I think the Scots over the last 20 years, when they have achieved absolutely nothing in the international arena, their confidence has been trampled underfoot and trampled over again. So going to Dublin, they will have zero expectations, fans, of anything other than a defeat. I think a lot of it goes back to how did the rest of the squad take this news of Russell's exit. It has the potential to demoralise them if they feel that he's been hard done by. It has the potential to galvanise them if they think Russell has overstepped the mark. Huge pressure on Adam Hastings now, because when we stop talking about Finn Russell, we'll start talking about Adam Hastings and the pressure that he's under. It's compelling. It's one of the biggest stories in professional rugby in Scotland, well, possibly ever. Possibly the biggest story, because there hasn't been any success in it. So Russell leaving or being ejected is right up there as a story.
All right, Tom English, thanks a lot for taking the call. Keith, great to talk to you as always.
Cheers, gents.
Cheers, Keith.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.